Hello, welcome back to Post Viral. Thanks so much for listening. Just a reminder that all of the opinions in the episode are just mine and Lindsay's. We'd recommend working with a medical professional for individualised care. Hope you enjoy the show and get something out of it.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to Post Viral, everyone.
Welcome to Post Viral.
How are you, Lindsay?
I'm good, Stu.
Yeah, you've finally gotten over your tough week or so with the gut business.
Yeah, I eventually ended up having to take the antibiotics because it was like Armageddon in my butt and it was just not getting any better.
So much information. We're sorry, everyone.
There was no signs of stopping. So I took the antibiotics and then they really seem to have worked. So sometimes, you need them, I think. And then you've been having a rough week now.
Yeah. At first, I just thought it was general post-exertional malaise, but I think something is going on. Not quite the same as yours, but maybe it's the same and like showing up in a bit of a different way. Just horrible brain fog, migraine.
Yeah, it's sticking around.
Not fun, especially as... So I'm not 30 yet, but by the time this goes out...
You're gonna be 30!
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Happy birthday! So happy to be with you for your 30th.
Off in a tropical land.
I have something planned.
Ooh, excited. Looking forward to it.
So, we have a listener question. So this one is from Simone.
Hi, Simone.
So it's around pacing. Her question is, when you built up your steps, how much did you increase them each time? Did you go straight from 1,000 to 2,000 in one day? I feel like I'm terrible at this. I'm going to be walking around the block forever. I feel like we've all been there.
Oh, yeah. And the stressing about, is it too much? Is it not enough? Yeah, really get that.
Yeah, no, I think this was a good question because something that I forgot to mention in the pacing episode is for me and for others who menstruate out there, the time of the month makes a big difference in terms of how I'm feeling and how much I can progress because my symptoms are way worse around that time of the month. So I would say, no, I didn't usually go straight up 1,000 steps in a day, but I was able to increase more. At times of the month I felt better. Like it really depends on what other factors are going on as well. Also, so once I got more towards 5,000, 6,000 steps, I was able to make bigger jumps. Whereas when I was around 1,000 steps, I could only maybe add an extra few hundred steps. Yeah, it's kind of a percentage thing. So you add maybe 5 to 8% of where you're at. But I think it gets easier and less scary over time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. 5% seems to work for me. I kind of do it like monthly. So I might aim to increase 5% in a month. And if it's too much, you just bring it down a little bit. But yeah, kind of 5% increase, not just in walking, but in like most other things as well, stretching, reading, desk work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and also just one more note on the period stuff. It has been a big issue for me. One recommendation I would have is there's a book called the Period Repair Manual, and it's written by a naturopath, and there's a lot of good advice in there. Whether you have endometriosis or you just have heavy periods or hormonal issues for you. She covers all kinds of things.
Good tip. Cool. So last time we talked about how personality types can lead to chronic fatigue. And today we are going to be honing into one of them. So which one are we focusing in on today?
We're diving deep into emotional awareness and emotional processing.
Nice. A bit nicer than repression. We talked about last time.
If you're like, oh shoot, am I repressed? Don't worry, we're gonna give you some strategies, and you're gonna either figure out if you do have some things in your background that maybe you got to work on, or just in general day-to-day strategies that could help most people, I think.
Yeah, this was one that was flagged to me early in my illness from people that worked in therapy and counsellors. They were saying, oh, we've had patients that it has helped doing therapy and unpacking traumas. And I was kind of like, I'll try. I'll try anything, but I'm not sure if this is necessarily relevant for me. But I do think, even if this isn't necessarily the cause of your fatigue, ability to process emotions is never a bad thing. And also, what we talk about in kind of all our episodes is that if this can help 1% of your health improvement, then that's no bad thing. And, you know, if this alongside the nutrition or the pacing or other things too, it all adds up. So hopefully there's something for you in what we talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. It's about like knowing yourself better, loving yourself more, forgiving yourself. There's a lot to this. By talking about things that will possibly help regulate your system, could be very helpful for you. Or maybe you'll listen to this and be like, doesn't apply to me. But honestly, I didn't think this stuff applied to me until the last about year and a half, when I really let myself. I really went deep and I found out some stuff.
Looking forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, but it can be scary. Be aware that, like, diving into your traumas and things we're going to talk about, bringing up past memories that could be triggering and stuff. Be gentle with yourself. Go slowly. There's no rush to like figure it all out in one day. I do think it's important because I've said before, I did a brain retraining course. I did the DNRS and I got so much better for a few months. I thought I was almost there. I was getting there. And then, bam, I had the hugest crash, all my energy drained out of my body. And it kind of feels like this was the missing piece. It's hard to know for sure, but it feels like I needed this. There's a part of brain retraining we'll talk about in our next episode where it can be a little bit toxic positivity because it doesn't quite teach you what we're going to talk about today about processing emotions.
Yeah. My interpretation, having not done a brain retraining program, but it's kind of, don't worry about those emotions you're feeling. Just focus on this is where you're going to get to, and the positive side of it.
Yeah, I think if you're someone who in their childhood was taught good regulation skills already, it might be that you don't need this stuff and you can just take a brain retraining course and it'll work for you, because obviously it has cured a lot of people. We know people who it has. But for someone like me who didn't have these skills or knowledge, it wasn't enough, obviously.
I feel like for me, no matter what happens with my health, the tools that I've learned around emotional awareness and processing that I've built into my day-to-day life now, pretty sure that I'll continue to use this throughout my life and throughout my health circumstances, because I just think it's really helpful to understand myself better and to just live in a healthier state of mind because of it. I have a brainchild idea to build an app for children around emotional processing, which I'm sure there is one out there and parents are probably saying, we know this. But if there is one already, I'm sure it is helpful for children just to learn about the benefits of emotional awareness and processing. So, Lindsay, which animal is emotionally aware?
The animal is the antelope.
The antelope, ooh.
But really, I'm going to talk about ungulates in general. Do you know what an ungulate is?
No, I've never heard of that.
It sounds like very nefarious, but it's just a hoofed animal.
Okay.
It's our hoofed friends.
I would say hoofed, but...
Hoofed? Our words.
Ungulated, okay.
Ungulates, yeah. So antelope has been used as an example for emotional processing because when they're being chased by like a lion or something and they're about to be eaten and then say they get away at the last minute, what is seen is that they need to like shake it all off, have this physical stress release out of their body because it's built up from this stressful situation, and they shake it out of their body. And it's interesting because we're going to talk about regulation strategies, and it's cool that our animal friends, some of them do that naturally.
Yeah. I've had the horrible experience of hitting a deer because I live in the country, dark roads at night, and fortunately, the deer was okay, but got out my car. We were like, who do we ring? A vet or the RSPCA in the UK? But the deer just sat there looking at us, blank stare for about 2 minutes. And then another car came along, floodlights on it, just shook itself off suddenly and sprinted away. And it was like, oh, wow, it's good. It's okay. And I've seen the shake to shake its nervous system out of freeze.
Yeah, it's their nervous systems having this reaction, which I'm a huge freezer when it comes to conflict. That's exactly what happens to my nervous system. Thoughts stop coming to my brain when someone's yelling. Yeah, another cool thing about deer, not antelope in Africa, but deer in North America, is how they shed their antlers every year. And the cool thing about that, I just think about how this emotional processing is not just something you do once. It's kind of something you have to keep revisiting and will keep coming up throughout your life. You're not just one and done once you've addressed these things. There's a lot of levels to it.
Yeah.
And another animal I just wanted to talk about, another ungulate, is our dear friends, the horse. Horses are very emotionally present animals. They're very able to feel people's emotions, and they've actually started using them for therapy. I know of a few people who've gone to horse therapy, and they literally get the people to tell their problems to the horse and like feel a connection with the horse. And then maybe you've also seen how horses, they have to trust you before they'll let you like touch their hoofs. So I just think that's really beautiful, the emotional connection that these animals who are, they don't use their brains as much as they use their emotional nervous systems. They're more primitive animals in a lot of ways, but they're so beautiful too.
Yeah. My sister used to run an animal care club, and she would have young offenders come in to help look after the horses, and I know that was really healing and very effective way to start conversations and to help bring these young people out of their shells. So nice. No, there's a lot of good metaphors and things in there for us to learn.
You can DM me if you want more ungulate facts.
Learn a new word. That's cool.
Hoofed animals.
So I guess a good place to start would be to explore the link between emotional repression and trauma as well, and chronic illnesses. I know we mentioned this last time, but maybe to go a bit deeper into some of the practitioners that we've learnt this from.
Yeah, what the psychologists who've really worked with people and found a lot of progress through working with people have found.
Yeah. So a big person that's influenced Lindsay and myself in our thinking is Dr. Sarno, American doctor who sadly is no longer with us. But he developed this theory called tension myositis syndrome, which is basically where the nervous system has become oversensitized, causing chronic pain, fatigue, fibromyalgia. And interestingly, he found gastrointestinal problems as well.
Yeah, quite a few different illnesses, migraines.
And it was back pain was the one that he became most well known for, but it's definitely in these kind of chronic pain area too. And basically what he was saying is that where tests can't necessarily find the cause, it's often suppressed emotions which will slowly but surely compound and trigger the nervous system. And actually saying that the subconscious mind is trying to protect the person from these emotions by instead presenting them as pain. So by learning to address and process these unconscious repressed emotions, he actually found that patients could heal, which sounds very out there.
Well, and it feels counterintuitive that this is my body protecting me. Why would this be a protection mechanism?
Yeah, exactly.
But it also kind of makes sense in a way because it's protecting you by keeping you. It can be really scary to look into your traumas and look into your past experiences and your childhood and how they might have affected you over time and how that's accumulated. So your brain is doing something to be like, let's just give you some pain instead.
But I definitely see the accumulation over time of small events. If I look back now, kind of warning signs until it led to full-blown CFS, for me at least. And I think maybe for you too, Lindsay.
Yeah, definitely. In my 20s, so many infections and so much running from situations out of fear. So I can see how not addressing the root cause of those could have been a part of my illness.
And it's pretty convincing the stats around TMS, this tension myositis syndrome. He found that of over 100 patients that he worked with, 88% felt completely pain-free after 1 year up to 3 years, which 88% is...
Yeah, those are huge numbers.
Huge numbers, yeah. Obviously, it's his study, but...
These are his studies, and he also says that the people that didn't recover, he thinks might just have needed more therapy. Like if it doesn't work for you pretty quickly, he says, work with a therapist.
Yeah, and it's not just Sarno. Louise Hay, who writes the book You Can Heal Your Life, and she's helped thousands of people. Some of her methods are quite out there, I would say. Like, basically, her view is that your body is a mirror of your beliefs and thoughts. So she actually links physical symptoms to specific emotions. So chronic pain, she would say, comes from chronic guilt. Migraines come from perfectionism and pent-up anger as well, which you can see when you look at Sarno's work a bit more. There are similarities there between the two. And then our friend Gabor as well.
Gabor Mate talks a lot about childhood trauma and how these emotions that we didn't feel or were invalidated maybe by someone in our childhood. So that could just be someone being like, oh, you're okay, you're fine, instead of letting you feel your sadness. I'm not blaming anybody. A lot of people think that's the nice thing to do, is to tell someone, you'll be fine, fine.
It's a form of comforting, isn't it?
Yeah, they're trying to be kind. But if that happens enough, as Gabor talks about, you start doing it to yourself. When you start to feel a feeling like anger, you're like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. And you can start pushing those down as well. Gabor has some very vivid examples of people's childhoods and experiences growing up. If you read his book, When the Body Says No, you might relate.
Yeah, he does a similar job, doesn't he, of specific long-term illnesses, relating them back to personality tropes, and a lot of it is repressed emotion or not processing emotions in perhaps the healthiest way. Yeah, it's interesting.
And then Dr. Perry, who's a really interesting guy. There's a great interview with him and Oprah. Dr. Bruce Perry talks about trauma. He and Oprah and I all had a big woohoo moment together. No, we didn't. They figured it out.
Guest star Lindsay.
Yeah, right. No. I didn't know about this difference between small T trauma and big T trauma. And if you haven't heard that before, small T trauma is these microaggressions that accumulate over time, as we've kind of mentioned already. It doesn't have to be one big traumatic event that happened. That can also definitely impact your health. But it might be that you're like me, who never had any one big traumatic event happen to them, but a lot of little things, being taught little repressions.
So like the example you gave of, you're okay, invalidating that emotion.
These things add up. Or if there was something in your childhood that a parental figure did quite often, even if it wasn't that bad, but it affected you, you're in your nervous system over and over and over again. These things add up over time. And everybody's different, right? Like, I know that I was a sensitive child, and some other people might have had the same things happen to them and not have felt the same like repercussions. So you can't really just say like,
oh, well, they're fine, so you should be. Yeah, we all have different capacities and different experiences, yeah. It's interesting, the microaggressions. I think it's in that interview too. Dr. Perry talks about marginalized groups and minorities. He's a neurologist, I think. And the studies they've done have looked at those small microaggressions that minorities deal with day in, day out in society, and how that builds up to have a similar effect, traumatic effect, as someone who experiences a big T trauma. And interestingly, Gabor, in his book too, he talks about Japanese immigrants being twice as likely to have prostate cancer. He talks about African Americans in general, the rate of them getting sick. And he does say, there are socioeconomic factors too, but it feels like the psychological pressure of that as well is playing a part too.
Yeah, and how that changes your brain. Our brains are really plastic, which is also something to say, like, don't worry, you're not screwed if this has happened to you before. We're going to talk about neuroplasticity and how the brain can change.
And I suppose the link then between trauma and your emotions and potentially chronic illness, I think Gabor, again, he sums this up quite nicely, is that if you haven't necessarily processed the emotion around a trauma, or if, the trauma has led to this repressed feeling, then that can create more stress in your body, conscious or I guess subconscious stress that's happening. And if stress in the body, which I see it as like demand on the body, stress, if that is greater than your capacity to deal with the stress, creates dis-ease in the body. The nervous system is overwhelmed, which if that's happening with like a trauma, which has happened a long time ago and it's building up, then you can see how it can be quite a devastating outcome for your body.
Yeah, the example for me was at the end of my master's when I was like struggling to get my thesis done and my supervisor was not being very helpful and then pretty much said she doesn't know if I'll finish in time. And it was like she saw me as the imposter I am. Right. And if I have to tell everyone I'm not going to finish on time, what'll they think of me? All the things that I've been working so hard for people to see me a certain way. And then I feel like this stress, it just accumulated into like an explosion maybe. Right. And I never linked that before to my childhood until recently, of course. Every day going to school was very stressful for me because of this deep fear of pop quizzes. If I had a pop quiz and I didn't know what I was talking about, because I didn't study unless I had to study, of course, I would be revealed as the fake I thought I was. Right. Even though I did very well in school, a pop quiz could totally demolish me. Wow. And it almost feels like my master's thesis, that fear came true when she said, I don't know if you'll finish in time. This isn't good enough. It's happening. Oh. So, it's so interesting, the connections.
I guess a good place to start maybe for the two of us, before all of this, how we would deal with emotions as a starting point. So I suppose growing up, Lindsay, and then into your early adulthood, what did that look like for you?
I mean, it's a lot of things I talked about in the last episode of emotions that maybe weren't so productive instead of feeling the deeper emotions. So been huge on guilt my whole life, feeling guilty about all these things, about have I done enough? And now I can see where that came from in my childhood, instead of feeling a deeper emotion that would have been more productive. Same with worry, like worrying about the future is actually not very productive, but you feel like you're being productive. Yeah. And when you're in a bad mood and you can't really place why, worrying really feels like you might be getting to it.
It's almost distraction again because your mind is racing.
Yeah, it makes me think of when my cat died. Like I wouldn't go look downstairs and look at her body. I wouldn't go near her. I just stayed in my bedroom and I read the entire third Lord of the Rings book like in a weekend, because like instead of thinking about it, I was like, I'm just gonna read this book and then I don't have to think about the fact that my cat is dead. So yeah, definitely distraction, focusing on other people's problems has been huge for me. That's way easier than thinking about my own problems. And I love helping people, so.
Yeah, you feel like you're being productive.
Exactly. Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I think I grew up in an environment where I learned that emotions were almost embarrassing. So anger or crying or being over the top with affection. I was thinking about this and I remember like if I ever saw road rage on the roads, just being a bit embarrassed and awkward about it as opposed to talking about it, and almost feeling like a bit superior about the fact that, oh, well, I don't feel emotions, because I would attach shame to if I did get overwhelmed or emotional. So I now, with this whole theory, look back and see that prolonged period of repression of emotions. And then I had this big life event where realizing I was gay, but not necessarily knowing what to do with that or make sense of it. Then it doesn't really surprise me that anxiety came out as a result of that, which I talked about last time too, because that anxiety came at a time after like years of repression, at a time where I was distinctly leading two very separate lives in certain environments and at home in a Christian environment, still wanting to practice faith and being, I suppose, straight, quote unquote. I told some people about my sexuality but wasn't public with it. And then in other environments with other friendship groups being out and out gay. And so really feeling the tension of those two and all of the emotions that come with it, just push it down, I don't want to deal with this. I know I have to deal with it. And it came out a couple of times. I remember crying with one of my friends at uni about it all, but I wasn't really facing up to it. I wasn't processing that emotion. And then I can now see the first time I really experienced that panic attack was pretty much directly as a result of that.
Yeah, and sometimes, like you said, it comes out in like these bursts, like you said with your friend. And for me, when I was sick, I felt too guilty for anybody to take care of me. Right. So I moved myself to the secluded island because, again, like I was in my room when my cat died, things are always safer when you're by yourself, was my point of view, this like avoidance. But like due to my childhood and certain feelings around fear of other people, to me it was safer to be by myself. And I didn't realize until a few years of being alone on an island that, oh, actually this is not making me better. And yeah, you do need connection. Sometimes when you feel like you're doing the safe thing being alone and you're not burdening anyone, you're actually isolating yourself.
Yeah, and doing longer term harm.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some strategies. We're going to start with in the moment self-regulation strategies that you can use if a stressor is coming up in the moment, because there's both like long-term trauma that you need to deal with or you might want to deal with. But first we're going to talk about how could we better soothe ourselves and regulate in the moment.
So I know, both of us really loved Emily and Amelia Nagoski's book Burnout, which, if you haven't read it, they're twin sisters, and Emily, a sexual health practitioner, she was in the hospital with her twin sister Amelia again. Amelia had been burnt out physically, but emotionally, and was very ill because of this. And they had this conversation, Emily realizing that Amelia, she wasn't processing the emotions going on in her life, and then quickly realized that a lot of women and people in general didn't necessarily know about this. And so they wrote this book. The big theory within it is this idea that emotions are tunnels that we should travel through. But if we don't travel all the way through them, they get trapped in the body. Whenever there is a stressor in your life and you have an emotional reaction, just because you've dealt with the stressor, so you might have finished that piece of work, it doesn't necessarily mean you've dealt with the stress or the emotion. You've dealt with the stressor, but not necessarily gone through the tunnel of emotion.
Yeah, good explanation for it. And then they cover, was it eight different regulation strategies? What are they? And we'll talk about a few examples.
These are cool just to think about in your own life, which ones are part of your day-to-day life. The first one is movement. They say that movement is definitely best, which obviously is a struggle if you have chronic fatigue.
Yeah. It's been so frustrating not being able to walk at the start. That was my thing, and my thing growing up too, like walking the dog.
Yeah, you loved that for clear your head.
That was I'd take the dog for hours and hours and hours. Yeah.
One option they talk about, if physical movement isn't necessarily an option, is just to clench every area of your body in turn, visualizing that you're defeating the stress. I've tried this a couple of times, and one time I did it, I did suddenly feel a wave of emotion coming over me, really built up, felt quite emotional, wasn't really sure why, and then release, which was quite cool.
Yeah,
so
I totally forgot about TRE, tension release exercises, which I was really into for a little while. Cool. And it teaches you a specific set of tightening muscles and releasing, and then you have this really big release at the end. I really do recommend it for people if you want to look into.
Worth a try. The next one is conscious breathing. We've talked about this a bit before in our rest episode. meditative breathing, different types of breathing.
Yeah, we're big fans of Breathe with James. He has Instagram. He does twice a week or 3 times a week breathing sessions together.
Yeah. So yeah, movement, bit of breathing, laughing, big deep belly laughs. They're big fans of. Can see that. Yeah, laughter is a way to release tension. Sometimes nervous laughter is actually helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the biggest comedy fan, so it's helped me a lot over my illness. I know that.
So the next one, hugging. They talk about the science behind hugging for 20 seconds. And the next one, affection in general. You can see how with chronic fatigue, it's easy to isolate yourself off, as you're saying, Lindsay, and not necessarily laugh so much, not hug so much, experience that affection.
It's really hard too these last few years with COVID, since a lot of us have to be so careful with our immune systems. When my friends used to visit me on that island, I would put a thick blanket over their head and hug them, because we were so scared of COVID back then. And you just got to get those hugs in any way you can.
I mean, I'm not a particularly tactile person, and then I think, again, moving back home and being slightly more isolated from my friendship group, it was like, oh yeah, I've definitely missed some of that affection, hugging in my life. Which brings nicely on to the next one, social connection, which again, I think we've kind of just covered it there, but so important. They talk a lot about with strangers too, so even if you don't necessarily have people close to you, when you're at the till in a shop, trying to connect with the cashier just to remind yourself that the world is good, which I think is quite a nice little reminder for us.
Yeah, loneliness has been a huge problem for me over the course of my illness, and wanting to live alone because of all the obstacles around living with other people. And yet when you live alone, you're alone so much and it's so lonely. So being here with Stu has been so great for me. And interestingly, I've struggled with a lot of pain in my left leg, but since we've been in Mexico, I have had no pain in my left leg. And I wonder, in that Sarno way of thinking, if it's because finally the loneliness thing has been dealt with. I don't feel lonely at all.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great example. So then crying is one, a good cry. I definitely find since having CFS, I am more emotional watching emotional films or pieces of music. I often try and explain it to friends. It's when you're hungover and you get very emotional about things, that's kind of how it feels a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know because when I'm more tired, I cry more. But it's good to let that stuff out.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Real release of emotion when you cry. And the last one, creative expression, which is interesting because I don't think it's necessarily you have to express the emotion that you're feeling through it. They actually say just the act of a piece of dance or some expressive writing, whatever it is for you.
They do art therapy with people who've been traumatized. It can be really helpful
My boss, actually, she quit her corporate job to become it's not therapy, it's art mindfulness as a practice. Check out Masterpiece if you want. They're on Dragon's Den in the UK, so.
So cool. If I ever had my dream come true of having a retreat center, there'd be art therapy there too. Nice. Yeah. Another person who gives some strategies that I've found useful for in the moment processing is Tara Brach. She's a New World Buddhist, American Buddhist teacher, and she has this strategy called RAIN. RAIN stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. So it's a process you can do when you're having an emotion. So you're recognizing, what is this emotion I'm feeling? And you might be also figuring out where in my body am I feeling this? It's easier for some people than others. It took me a long time to figure that out. And allow it to be there. Don't try to push it away. Allow it to exist. Investigate, I think, is kind of why might I be feeling this way? Where could this have stemmed from?
Yeah. What triggered this? When does it feel most intense?
Yeah. Really going into the emotion, investigating it. And then nurture, which I love, because nurture is about self-compassion. Usually when you feel that feeling, you let it pass through your body And then you just got to nurture yourself and be like, I love you, Lindsay. And
you don't need it to be a certain way. It's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. There are certain things like grief and things that just are, and acceptance as well. Like for our illness, for a point, you can definitely feel that sadness. And then you got to show yourself self-love.
Nice. No, I love that. I mean, I've never done RAIN consciously, but similar journaling questions. So what do I feel like this emotion is trying to communicate to me, or what do I take that to mean about me? Investigating that is interesting with anxiety because, for so long was just trying to quash the emotion or the sensations, but actually trying to investigate what do I take this anxiety to mean, and going back and trying to uncover what is the root belief behind the anxiety. So for me, a big one is I actually don't feel enough in that situation, like I'm unworthy or whatever it is. And so, those investigate tools I think are good ones. Another question which is quite good is like, what was the thought I had before this emotion? That thought isn't necessarily true. Like you've had thoughts sometimes which trigger emotional reaction, which actually are like, shut up. Like,
that's really a good tip.
Cool. So now the shifting focus onto processing trauma and trapped emotions. The Sarno Technique. So there's a really good video actually explaining this from Nicole Sachs. We can share the link for the last part that kind of summarize this technique.
So good, yeah. What Nicole explains in her videos, drawn from Dr. Sarno, is this technique for journaling and getting to the root of all these feelings that are trapped in your body. So what is suggested is to divide a piece of paper into 3 and make one column for personality tropes.
So things like perfectionism.
People pleasing.
Yeah.
Things that you feel are your issues. Guilt for me is a big one, and being an avoider. Avoiding things like that. Really, you could go as far as you want if you're a gossip or whatever. This is where you want to get real honest. This is for nobody ever to see but yourself. The next column is childhood traumas. And this, again, small t traumas. We're talking about little things that might have caused feelings of anger or sadness that you may not have processed fully.
Just things that stick out, I think, for me. That's what I did. That I still didn't feel comfortable with looking back, or just stuck out for whatever reason.
Or ways people around you acted that maybe you were like, oh, was that right? Or how did that affect me? You could put that on your list. And then the third column is daily pressures. So you might have your kids, your work, your neighbor, whatever is really, is you're making a huge list of all the things that could be stored in your body. And then what you want to do with this is every day spend 20 minutes. You pick one of them from your list, and for 20 minutes you free write. You just let your brain go. You write the title, so if it's my people pleasing or whatever, and then you're just like, whatever comes to your brain, let it out. Don't worry, no one's ever gonna see this. I have literally ripped them into tiny pieces.
Get that rage out. Yeah, sometimes with these I've liked writing a letter that I know they're not going to see, but if it was about someone else, just getting it all out onto the page.
All my swear words come out.
And you might find, I've definitely found that sometimes I will come back to the same issue multiple times if I don't feel I've quite come to peace with whatever it is that I'm writing about.
And sometimes you're writing about something and it triggers another memory and you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta write about that too. And then you start getting angry about that.
But it's cool, this Penbaker study, which is when they ask these students to journal for 4 days in a row for 20 minutes, free write, about something that they found upsetting, an issue. They actually saw much better health outcomes for those students for the next year because they had really like unleashed all of this emotion, really processed it, got it out on the page, compared to the other control group that didn't do this. So there is science that, again, we can share this, that validates this Sarno technique of really kind of getting out everything onto the page, free writing, stream of consciousness, journaling.
Yeah, it's weird too when you start, you can get a little addicted to it. It starts to feel really good to like finally be saying the words you never would have said out loud in a million years.
Yeah.
We often go straight to forgiving people instead of feeling that feeling in between. And this is really letting you have that in between period. And then you might find, like myself, that now it's easier to get to the point where I knew why the person acted the way they did, but now I've gone through the whole process, through the whole tunnel, and felt my emotions, and I can feel my sympathy for their experiences and forgive them.
While not invalidating your own experiences.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
But the next step to this too, which I think is important, again, kind of like with rain, is the nurturing yourself. Make sure after you do this, something some psychologists suggest is like you go back and you comfort little you. You've realized something that was unfair done to little you. You really got to feel for that little child that went through this. And you can literally visualize yourself going back and giving them a hug and comforting them and saying that wasn't okay. Another strategy is to send back somebody that you trust in your life now, who you know would have seen this and been like, that's not okay. And what would they have said?
Yeah. I think having a specific person, definitely for me, now that I have a niece and 2 nephews, the whole how I would speak to the little child, it's a lot easier when it's not you because I'm very good at telling myself stories. But actually, how would I speak to those children? It's helpful to have a specific person, I find. Yeah, good tip. Cool. And then I suppose the final piece we just wanted to mention is all of the stuff we've talked about so far has kind of been self-work. But there could be a place for some external help, therapy, whether it's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or talking therapy.
Yeah, I've gone to a few therapists.
I've done some CBT and some therapy before too. Couldn't speak highly enough for particularly talking therapy as a safe space. But there are some other types of therapy too. So just because one type hasn't necessarily worked for you in the past, maybe don't dismiss all therapy. There could be a place for other techniques to help you. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, he's been a therapist since the 1950s, and he talks about every type of therapy there is going and the pros and cons and what it's like. So that's a good resource if you are interested in exploring alternative therapies.
Yeah, I'm always learning about new ones too. Like I only recently heard about this role play therapy where you can like actually act out this aggression that might be trapped in your body, and they play the part of whoever the person was.
That's a really cool one, yeah.
Yeah, just one more thing. Dr. Perry talks about how from post-traumatic stress comes post-traumatic wisdom. When you do the work and you do process these emotions and learn to regulate yourself a little bit and are able to look into your past and comfort yourself, it actually gives us a lot. Like, I think we've talked about that before. People who've been through stuff are the wisest people and able to better help others, super empathetic. Really, there's power in all this sadness that may have happened in our lives. So as hard as it is to look at these issues, you're probably going to come out stronger in the end for it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Elizabeth Kula quote we shared about beautiful people don't just happen. We shared that on the Instagram before. So yeah, I agree.
On that note, let's end with a beautiful poem.
Well, a bit of a cop-out. It's not mine. It's from the wonderful Rumi, The Guest House, which I know you like, Lindsay. Yeah, it's a very nice poem about emotions. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honourably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
It's really beautiful. I love it. Thanks, Rumi.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, I would love to hear if you're listening today and if you take on some of this and try out some of the emotional processing. I'd love to hear what's resonated, but also if you do start to see some healing, like it would be amazing to hear.
Yeah, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We have our Instagram and
postviralpodcast@gmail.com. So we'll be back next time with the next personality trope and some healing techniques to help with it.
yeah, hope everyone's well.
Hasta luego.
Peace.